So, what would happen if you gave up bread for 30 days? Now, this topic is not very popular. People love their bread. And anytime you get close to telling someone to give up bread, not a good thing. All sorts of very negative reactions can occur simply because we just love our bread. So in this video, I'm not telling you to give up your bread. All I'm doing is consider what would happen if you did give up your bread for 30 days. And I want to talk about the effects of that. There's some information in here that you probably have never heard about, and it's really interesting. So just stay tuned. And there's a lot of things that bread can do to you in a negative way. One, affect your blood sugars. And I'm not going to cover the fact that most bread has glyphosate, and it's an herbicide that can create all sorts of issues. What I want to talk about today is the gluten part of bread. Now, gluten is a general term for a lot of different proteins, okay? It's not just one protein. And it's the protein in certain grains, especially wheat. And gluten is basically the only protein that our bodies cannot fully digest. And gluten is associated with this thing called celiac disease, which is damaged small intestine. The layer is damaged to the point where you have these classic symptoms. And the three big classic symptoms would be bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. People that are gluten intolerant, as well as people that have antibodies that actually show that they have celiac, many times, in fact, the great majority of the times, don't have these classic symptoms, which is very, very strange. So people are like, well, maybe I can get away with it if I just keep eating it because I don't have symptoms. And even the reason why I'm doing this video now is that I've been doing a lot of DNA testing on various people, and so many people, and the great majority of people, show a genetic problem with gluten intolerance. I mean, it's in their genes, right? It just tells us that they have genes that make them very susceptible to getting celiac. Yet, the great majority of people, when I talk to them, have virtually no GI symptoms, okay? They don't have bloating, they don't have abdominal pain, and they don't have diarrhea. Now, I recently found out by doing a deep dive in this topic why they don't have those symptoms. And it's because of this. One specific protein, as a part of the complex of gluten, is called gliadinins. And this protein stimulates the opioid receptor. Gluten can give you a morphine like effect in your gut and other places in your body, masking a lot of your GI symptoms. In other words, you eat the bread and you don't feel bad from it, which is going to lead to more eating it on a regular basis, thinking that you're totally fine and you can handle it, when in fact the damage is being done, okay, but you're not feeling it. It's kind of numbing the GI problems. Typically, gluten decreases the transit time of stuff going through the intestines, giving you constipation. But when people take morphine, that increases the transit time. So a person could end up with, like, if they have too much morphine, like diarrhea, but the fact that they have gluten and the effect of a slower digestive tract, um, combined with the morphine effect, which increases the transit time, can actually give you kind of this neutralize effect where you just have elimination that's normal. Gluten is a silent killer. Okay. Now, there are many, many other symptoms that gluten can affect that are not even connected to your GI system. It can affect your blood sugars. It can create hypoglycemia. It can even trigger diabetes. It can trigger Hashimoto's, which is hypothyroidism, psoriasis, as well as dermatitis. It can create depression and anxiety. It can even trigger autism and attention deficit disorder and even changes in the brain. But some of those symptoms in the brain can be numbed by the morphine like effect of the opioids, but an actual reduction of size of your gray matter and cerebellum. There's also a higher amount of prolactin, which can affect your periods, heavy periods, irregular periods, erectile dysfunction, if you're a guy. So, as you can see, just because you don't have GI symptoms from gluten doesn't mean it's not affecting you in many other ways. This is why I think it's very, very important to consider not consuming bread or grains for 1 month. Boy, there are certain groups out there that are really pushing to get everyone to consume whole grains. And I'm talking like 65% of your calories, which I think is extremely bad advice just based on the gluten interaction alone. I mean, if you really want to know if you have a problem with gluten, you want to do either a biopsy of your small intestine, which is pretty invasive, which I actually don't recommend that part. Instead, I would recommend a blood test that looks for the antibodies that are related to celiac. Get that test done. And if it shows positive, or you get a DNA test and you have gluten intolerance on your DNA test, which makes you susceptible, you definitely want to consider getting off this bread. Now, what about the topic of just gluten free foods, right? Well, that's a step up, but the problem is you're still consuming grains and you're still going to have the blood sugar effects. You're still going to have the problems with insulin. You're still going to have the weight gain problems. You're still going to have the glyphosate issue. But the good news is there are a lot of alternative breads out there, recipes that can satisfy that desire for bread. And I'm going to put a bunch of links down below. I have a really, really cool video on probably one of the healthiest breads that you can eat. And that video had millions of views. And if you haven't seen that, I'm going to put that up right here. Check it out.